Oh,
right in the chat. Hello, everybody. It's Matt Gritzmacher, joined by John McWhinney. Uh, Recording this tape-delayed Olympic preview show for Tuesday night. So hello on Tuesday night. We're cramming it in when we have free time on Sunday afternoon, just like the real TV shows do it. So let's see. It just feels like I don't need to do the intro, but I do because it's a different day. I'm Matt Gritzmacher. I'm joined by John McWhinney. We're from UBBowen.com. We are previewing UB's Olympic sports because the two of us cover all of UB's Olympic sports during the season. And we're previewing them because we procrastinated too long on writing previews for all these topics that we want to talk about. We'll still have written previews next week, the week of the 15th, on a team-by-team basis, as we've done in the last couple of years. But in terms of talking about things, Cerrone, very awesome. Who are the new faces that we need to know on the tennis team? Who should we pay attention to in cross country? What's going to happen with Laura Dougal's chase for UB records on the women's soccer team? These are things that we wanted to write, and now we just are talking on video, which is fine. So we've got another lineup of a half dozen different topics from across UBS athletics through them, and then use them on Tuesday night, which when you see it will be now, but for us it's in the future. John, women's soccer coming off two consecutive MAC East championships, which I think it's funny to call them MAC East championships considering they play a true round robin. But 2 years as the unquestioned top team in the East. We're really another one of UB's teams that fell in the conference semifinal last year, but if they won the semifinal, they would have won the championship because somehow Akron upset Ball State. I still don't understand how that happened. Going back to back, but they didn't. It feels like 2 years in a row they've lost a bunch of big names, and yet at the same time it felt last year like they had a lot coming back. And this year it does still feel like they have a lot coming back, but there's also a lot of new names. And if the past couple of years under Coach Burke has been any indication, at least one, maybe two freshmen will be on the opening day starting roster, and at least one, probably two more will get regular minutes as subs. And so pretty long list of freshmen. We've talked in other shows about other women's soccer things, and we'll have at least one more topic, I think two, in our next show after this. But right now we'll talk about the freshmen and the newer names. And so, John, who is someone on the of the freshman class who we really need to keep an eye on, who you think is going to be one of those starters?
well, you mentioned there were a bunch of losses this past year, some big names, and probably the biggest loss was former All-American Jackie Hall, and she left some pretty big shoes that needed to be filled in the back line, and I think one name that could potentially fill those is freshman Georgina Jandu. If you look at the defensive depth across the board for women's soccer, I think there are some clear names that will be starting. Then there's kind of that one center back spot that's kind of up for grabs, and I think Jandu has a really nice shot at both starting opening day and locking down the spot for probably the entire season. If Burke kind of sticks to the same pattern that he has the past few years, there's going to be 1 to 2 freshmen that do start, and I think Jandu's the one. It's at a position of quote-unquote need. I say need because the loss of Hall is very big. She was one of the best players that women's soccer has seen in recent memory. And Jandu comes from a top-notch program in Canada. The team that she played on, I believe, was sending 9 players to Division I on scholarship in the U.S.
Yeah.
So we know that she has played around and played with a lot of big-time talent. Look at me sounding like Danny White. She's played, you gotta beat the best to be the best, and Jandu has seen some of the best in Canada, and the best that she's seen there's a lot of talent that's coming here at the NCAA, and I think she it won't be as big of a gap between her prep career to D1 soccer, and I think she's one name to really watch out for to get a lot of playing time.
Yeah, I think it's partially because Jandu's been committed forever. We first learned about her during the championship season. She committed, a year or two before she could sign her letter of intent, and it's also partially because of that position of need. I think it's likely, and this is a conversation for a different time, the specifics of the lineup. I think it's likely that Angel Hart moves in inside to a center back position. And at the same time, I think between Hart, Simmons, Ashley Evans, I think there's still a role for Jandu to kind of step in. She did play on that super talented team with a bunch of D1 prospects. And she is coming in now, and I think she's someone who can contribute right away. I think my pick for probably the biggest impact, maybe not the biggest, but my pick for an impact freshman that I think will be hard for Burke to ignore is Adriana van Kuyk, and I hope that I'm pronouncing her name right. Vaguely Dutch name. Hopefully I'll find out pretty quickly if I'm pronouncing it wrong. She comes from Wayne Central, New York, which I think that UB has an advantage recruiting-wise because upstate New York and Long Island are particularly strong girls soccer in high school, girls soccer areas. And so there's an advantage here. And Adriana is someone who, how much she contributes to this team really depends on how the lineup kind of sorts itself out. She's listed as a midfielder / defender. And, Andrea Kniper's in that role. Andrea Kniper could play in more attacking role. Maybe Van Kuyk can play in a more attacking role. Depends on, what Ashley Evans, who's also listed as a midfielder / defender, fits into. There's lots of moving parts here. But Van Kuyk's someone who, again, I'm emphasizing how strong of a girls' soccer area upstate New York is. She was named All-Greater Rochester Player of the Year last year after scoring 36 goals. And she was a 2-year captain at Wayne Central. She played for the Empire Revs. I think we've got a lot of players who have played for the Empire Revs. It's not a bad club team as developmental programs go. And she's a 2-time, in addition to last year's All-Greater Rochester Player of the Year, she's 2-time All-Finger Lakes Player of the Year. And so, I think that her senior year is a big breakout. She could really be an under-recruited star for UB. She earned 3rd-team All-State last year, and I don't actually know in which class. I could find that out, but I won't at this very moment. But I think that, if she fits into, the toggling decisions we made in the lineup, that Van Kuyk is somebody who can provide a real offensive spark. Maybe she's the answer on the wing opposite Benatti that we talked about in the last show. I'm interested to see, who goes where. I just think she's someone you don't put together 36 goals without being real strong. Even, Sydney Surza, who I was super excited to get, and then she bailed for St. Bonaventure, which was an odd decision. Didn't have 36 goals in her junior year, the year that I was watching her. I don't know what she did her senior year, but that she's got a nose for scoring, and she's not super tall, but at 5'5" should be able to compete with most midfields in the MAC to get the ball. And that's assuming she plays a midfielding role. If she plays a defensive role, I'll expect to see her in the fullback position on the edges and not the center of the defense, and we'll see if she can help move the ball upfield quickly from there. But she's someone who I think stands a really good chance of being an impact freshman for UB.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of midfielders, actually, another one of the names on my list was Kara Daly, another Western New York native. She went to Hamburg High School. Again, a really successful prep career, all Western New York 3 times, all ECIC first team 4 times. She was a five-year varsity player. She had over 100 goals in her career. She's someone who I think may not have, depending on how the midfield shakes out, and there's plenty of questions there that still need to be answered, and they'll be answered once the games actually start. She's someone I think who can step in kind of a role that Rebecca Bramble had last year, kind of come in, towards halftime, give someone a rest, and then really be a high energy spark plug for the team. Daly has been on campus since the spring. I believe she went to Spain with the team, if I'm not mistaken. So she already has some time kind of gelling, with the girls already on the team and kind of getting a feel for how they play together. She, as far as prep careers go, she had a very successful one, put up near Charisma Catrona type numbers for goals in her career. She also played for the Empire Revs, and it really depends on how the midfield shakes out, like you had mentioned, Matt. But I think this year she's the second name that we see, maybe not starting, but I think she sees a real healthy number of minutes, definitely in a Rebecca Bramble type role like she had last year, coming off the bench, really being a high energy spark for the team.
Yeah, and I think, in as much as we talk about Buffalo area soccer, Van Kuyk was All Greater Rochester Player of the Year. I think that Daly, absolutely one of the top 3 players in Buffalo girls high school soccer these past couple years. Tough to put anyone on top of Marissa Berzone, who is headed to Colgate. I think Colgate. She was committed to BU at one point, and I think she ended up going to Colgate. But then, Sydney Surza, Marissa Berzone, and Cara Daly, I think, were unquestioned the top 3 players in Buffalo girls soccer this past year. And Daly, can bring that. Courtney Mann had that pedigree, and she was an All-MAC performer for UB. And I feel like I should know someone else, but I can't remember right now. So, Daly's a solid player. And so I think I agree with John. I had another name I wanted to talk about, and I thought it over, and I don't think I will. But I think between Zokali, Adriana Van Kuyk, and Georgina Jandu, those are probably our 3 front runners for freshmen who will make an impact from day one for UB. And that's what I have to say. Moving on, we planned for all these shows before we did any of them. I meant Cara Daly, not Carly Zokali. Sorry. Carly Zokali is another freshman who obviously is on my mind because we're talking about freshmen. We didn't highlight her here, but I meant Cara Daly. My apologies. Thanks, John. We ran these through before really we did any of the shows. So the next thing on our list is outside hitters in volleyball. John, I think in talking about the volleyball freshmen, we've kind of figured out that, in as much as Felicia Watkins and Raven Jordan are the returning experience, the pickup on the roster is from freshman Taina Benitez and Lauren Savosky, right? We went over that 2 shows ago.
Yeah, and even when you say that Raven Jordan is a quote-unquote returning outside hitter, she really didn't play all that much in her freshman season. I think it was only 19 sets.
Yeah.
So she's been with the team. She has more experience with the team, but for all intents and purposes, in terms of game action, she doesn't have all that much. So really, Watkins is our outside hitter, or our top option at outside hitter.
And we need 2.
So yeah, I think like we talked about a few shows ago, I think Benitez may have a really great shot at getting a lot of minutes, coming in as a true freshman. She came, like we had talked about, she comes from Cincinnati, Ohio, a particularly strong area for high school volleyball. And I know Paige has harped on the outside hitter depth. If I'm not mistaken, he's talked about that quite a bit. So it's something that definitely...
It's a point of particular need, I've thrown off your rhythm.
No, you just kind of broke up there.
It's a point of particular need. It makes sense that he's talking about it, that we're talking about it.
Yeah. So I think it's a big question mark for the team. It's one of the biggest question marks, really, with how many new faces there are. There's a good chance, we'll probably see. We'll see. I think we'll see at least one of the freshmen starting, but I think we can see multiple ones that'll get plenty of playing time, and I mean that's just bound to happen with the team as a whole, because I think the number of freshmen, the incoming freshmen, outnumber the number of returnees.
Yep, they do, and even beyond Benitez and
Lawrence Sadowski.
I think. Oh man, the only other freshman I can think of right now is Hannah Watson, and that's not her name. I mean, that's a name, but she's not an outside hitter.
Rachel Sanks.
I think Christina Curson is more of a middle blocker type. I don't think we'll see much of her this year. I guess Rachel Sanks is the only other one. But, I have no real reason other than, I just am more impressed by Slavoski and Benitez's prep numbers that Rachel Sanks couldn't also step into that role. And now we've effectively answered the outside hitter question just by listing all of the outside hitter on the roster, which is not.
Mm-hmm.
This is the expertise we bring you here at UB Bull Run sometimes.
Well, I don't think it necessarily answers the question. I mean, we listed all the names, but you only have one name that has a lot of in-game experience. So there's still a lot of question marks as to who is going to contribute what, how well are they going to contribute. So I think there's still a lot of questions. I don't think the question has necessarily been answered. Sure, we have more depth in terms of numbers now, but do we have depth in terms of people who can contribute and can contribute consistently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I keep coming back to I was not sold on Megan Lipsky at this time last year. She was inconsistent in her junior year, and I was not sold. And then she was as consistent as anybody on the team last year. So I think that nobody here has even the experience and anything that Lipsky brought last year, but I was surprised last year, and so maybe I can be surprised again.
All right. I think that's really all we have to say on volleyball. And another team, I believe in our last show, we've kind of hit on some of the newcomers for the men's swimming and diving team. So I think now we can hit on some of the newcomers for the women's team. And really the biggest name is Andrea Ernst, one of the top swimmers in Western New York. And she can do a little bit of everything from what she did in high school. Except for breaststroke, where depth is very
constant issue.
But she's another piece of the puzzle. I don't know, Matt, if you have anything else to say.
We talked about her 2 shows ago. She's someone who I think could surprise and step in. I think this past year we had a number of freshmen, especially on the freestyle side, step in and really impress in a way that we didn't expect. Outside of freestyle, Julia Box, of course, had a tremendous freshman year. And we were expecting more from Mallory Buha, and she's now transferred, which opens up room for someone like Andrea Ernst to come in and really provide a lot on backstroke and butterfly, and we'll see what she can do. But one of the best swimmers in Western New York comes from, I said this last show, comes from Orchard Park, which has a history of providing pretty strong swimmers to UB, has a history of competing favorably in the New York State Championships, if not in New York State powerhouse. They do well for a Western New York team. I'm excited to see what she can do. She's real versatile and exciting. Outside of Ernst, I think the name that I'm most eager is Anna Vittelens, who will come in and help with the breaststroke. We graduated one of the Valadon sisters this year, and we also graduated Holly Olson, who in general took UB's breaststroke spot in medley relays. And without Vitolins, all we have in terms of returns are Sharon Tiller and or Shani Tiller. Australian names confuse me sometimes. And the other, and Chrissy Zerka. And Zerka has really improved nicely over the last 2 years. But I'm excited just to get another breaststroking name in Vitolins. And she's someone who has a pretty good experience at a high school team. I think some of UB's other recruits aren't always coming in with a ton of accolades. And I think this year, in kind of the press release pub that Andy Basher had last December for swimming and diving, he talked about, sometimes you see things like, oh, they're just growing into their swimming career. They're late into it, and we'll really hope to see them improve a good deal. I think Vitolins is someone who's already an accomplished breaststroker and can step in and help out. And even if that wasn't true, just the fact that we're only going to have 3 breaststrokers on the roster, I think that Vitolins is a name to watch and a name that we need to watch. And, hope that she's successful, hope that she pushes Zerka and the other Valadon sister, into quicker times.
Mm-hmm. To be completely honest, Ernst was the only name that I had prepared to talk about. So I think we can keep trucking along and move on to men's tennis, which we had spoken about at some length a few shows ago. But really now I think we can talk kind of more in general terms of where the team is at. And when you look at the roster right now and kind of the ebbs and flows of the program, they're really starting kind of where women's tennis was a few years ago, where now they're starting to bring in kind of more en masse than women's tennis. Women's tennis had been bringing in 1 to 2 solid freshmen each year, and they've blossomed, between Margarita Kotak, Tanya Stoyanovska, and then this past season, Chantal Martinez Blanco, Mercedes Losada Rubio, and I always get hung up on her name. Sun Sutir. I don't know how to pronounce her first name.
Sanjana Sutir.
Sanjana Sutir. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Men's tennis has lost a lot more, and they're kind of bringing in another solid foundation to work on, and they're kind of moving into a new era of the team. And there's a lot of there's a lot of question marks, which we had noted some of them last time, where Ethan Nittolo and Tony Miller, really the only 2 guys we know that are coming back, and we're not even sure who's going to be playing number 1 singles. If it'll be one of those 2 that'll make the jump from 4, 5, 6 singles all the way up to first, or if it's going to be one of the newcomers. There's a lot more questions than answers at this point, and I'm hoping that the fall season will maybe help answer some of those as to who's playing where, who's doing what. Because we've really lost, I think you mentioned this a couple of shows ago, this is the first time in, I think, maybe the past 3 or 4 seasons that men's tennis doesn't have returning someone who is a MAC Player of the Year caliber type player. Yeah. Certainly Ethan Nittolo has the pedigree and could potentially be that player in the future, but as of right now, I'm not completely sold on him right now being a MAC Player of the Year contender. I think there's just a lot more questions than answers.
Yeah, I have very little to actually add to that, other than to say I think that Coach Nickel has earned time to rebuild his program. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes you see a year like this and you're like, boy, how long of a leash does a coach have? I'm of the mind that I prefer continuity, and I don't in general, and this is probably a reason that I'll never be in a role to hire and fire sports coaches, and I'm glad for that. But he's earned it. He's advanced to 4, 5 MAC finals. He finally won one. He's had multiple MAC Players of the Year it's significant. Even in a small conference with only 6 teams, it is significant to say this is the first time that we don't have someone of that caliber. And I think that the only thing I want to say, other than what you've already laid out, is that he's earned it. He's earned a chance to build a program in a way that he thinks makes sense. And as expectations go this year, I'd like to see whatever happens in the fall. I'd like to see improvement into the spring, and whatever's happening in the non-conference part of the spring, that ridiculous part of the schedule, and they'll play 4 Ivy League schools in 3 weeks. I'd like to see improvement and consistency from that to the MAC part of the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And I think otherwise, there's nothing really that I'm necessarily looking for or expect to see or anything like that. I just I think there's too many questions to even start to guess.
Yep. And I guess now we can move on to men's soccer. And last show we talked about who would replace Marcus Hansen. A couple shows ago we talked about Russell Cicerone, because of course we have to talk about Russell Cicerone. But one of the keys outside of Cicerone to UB's run to the MAC championship match last season was Joe Kuda. He transferred in from Robert Morris, really took over the starting goaltending duties. I think it was towards the end or after that stretch in the season where the team had traveled to Texas and they lost and or tied like 5 matches in a row, and they kind of hit a lull, a mid-season lull. Then Kuda steps in and really energizes the team and really provided a solid presence in between the pipes. And when you look at what he did during the MAC tournament, he played absolutely lights out between the Western Michigan game and the Akron game. He had 21 saves between the 2 games, and he really put himself on the map. And for as much as we talked about how Russell Cicerone is going to be an integral part to the team and how he is the leader of the team, I think Kuda is just as important. As we've seen with Laura Dougal on the women's side, having a good goaltender can really, really propel your team forward. And I think Kuda is that guy.
Yeah, I think something that I've definitely said in this run of shows, and has definitely appeared in our comments before, is in the 2014 season, the MAC high for saves in the game was 8, and a couple of different goalies had done it a total of maybe 7 times. Kuda had, in 4 games against Western Michigan and Akron last year, Kuda had 3 games of double-digit saves, including, I think, 11 against Western Michigan. And, UB had 2 one-goal losses to Akron. And speaking of, the run that he went on to help UB both make the MAC tournament and then really survive, and that's what they did, is survive against Western Michigan and then keep themselves in the game against Akron, really put Kuda on the level, at least for those 3 games, with Drew Shepard, who's Western Michigan's goaltender, and Akron's goaltender. And just to talk for a hot second a little bit more about what the MAC is like in men's soccer, Akron fields a starting lineup of 11, and I think there are two players in the entire conference who would keep their spot if all 11 of those players transferred to their team, if that makes sense, or would be starters on Akron's team, no doubt. And I admit that maybe I don't know how strong, the defense of the center back is for West Virginia or something like that, but I really believe that Drew Shepard at Western Michigan in goal and Russell Cicerone at Buffalo are the 2 players who would definitely, without a doubt, start on Akron's team. And otherwise, I think every other spot would be trouble. That's how strong Akron is nationally. That's how good they recruit. That's the kind of powerhouse that UB's working against. And for those 3 or 4 games last year, Kuda was on a level of Drew Shepard, best goalie in the MAC. Wish I could remember Akron's goalie's name right now, but he stopped a penalty kick against Akron either in the regular season or in the championship game. Honestly, can't remember that. what's his name? Sugimoto, the guy who does soccer for Buffalo News, said was the best penalty kick save, one of the best he's ever seen live. You know, when you go back and watch that video, and it was unreal how good his jump was and how full his extension was. If he can play like that for a whole season, UB will be a great team. Really not downplaying how big of a gap there is to Akron, or even the fact that Western Michigan was a better team than Buffalo last year. And I could write a very long post about how UB beat Western Michigan. A part of how UB beat Western Michigan last year was not they benefited from the fact that Drew Shepard didn't see many shots, which meant that they were hemmed in on their own end and meant that Kuda had to do his job first. But if Kuda can play like that for the whole season, I think UB is looking at a very, very exciting and strong season. I will never, ever say that, you know, I expect to beat Akron, and I'm not even really close to it. But a strong year from Kuda would mean that UB had one of the best goalies and the best attacking force in the MAC, and that's a whole lot of talent that can help go a long way. And so I'm really excited to see what he brings this year.
Yeah, that's I mean, when you look back at the Western Michigan game, Western Michigan took 27 shots to UB's 7.
Yeah.
And not to underplay how important Cicerone is on the offensive end, but if it weren't for Kuda and how well he was playing in goal, UB would have easily lost that game. Easily. And it wouldn't have been as close in either of the Akron games. Because, I mean, don't forget, I think UB was leading Akron at the half in the regular season, if I remember correctly.
I can't remember when the tying goal came, but they led for much of the first half. I think Akron scored a goal late in the first half. But it's not terribly important.
Yeah, but still, it was, both games were very close against very good teams, and Kuda was a very big reason for that, and he'll be if UB is to get back to the MAC championship game again this year, presumably against Akron, because it's always Akron. Kuda's going to be just as big of a reason as Russell Cicerone.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think we said what we want to say about Joe Kuda, and so it's that time of preview shows where I just say the word wrestling, and turn it over to John. In a couple minutes, I'll throw a couple nonsensical words out and then throw it back over to John again.
Okay. So we talked the last few times about people breaking out and people who are returning that we didn't really expect to return. And with all of that comes the real hard part for John Stutzman, and that's figuring out exactly what his lineup is going to look like. Matt, there's a couple of weight classes that I have highlighted that there's a lot of depth and not a whole lot of answers as to who is going to start. I mean, I could make several permutations of the lineup, and none of them would look remotely close to the same. But the first weight that I wanted to highlight was 125 pounds. Stutzman's returning Kyle Akins had a 19-win redshirt freshman season after not competing in any open tournaments at all while he was redshirting, recovering from a shoulder surgery. Finished 6th at the MAC championships. Won the New York State Collegiate Championship. I just had a really awesome season. Stutzman has been very lucky. He went from Max Soria to now Kyle Akins. The issue comes in the form of redshirt freshman Justin Patrick. Now, I know you in particular, Matt, are very, very high on him.
I mean,
and for good reason.
Justifiably so.
He had a 28-6 redshirt year competing in open tournaments. He won several championships, one of them being the National Collegiate Open. So technically by winning that, he won a national championship. And if you look back at the history of that tournament, most of the people who won went on to be All-Americans. So that's a very good sign for him going forward, but the real question is, who do you start? Akins very nearly made the NCAA tournament last year, and the style that he wrestles is very much Stutzman's style. Akins is very much a nose to the grindstone, tough as nails, gritty guy, and that's really what Stutzman looks for, is grit, and you can't really teach that. And I think that's what gives Akins the leg up in the wrestle. The wrestle off is going to be extremely fun to watch between the two. But I think Akins has the leg up. If you recall, I think we mentioned this a few shows ago, that the day after the MAC championships, Kyle Akins and Jake Gunning were back in the wrestling room training their butts off, getting ready for this coming season. And Akins made it to the United World Wrestling U.S. team trials to this offseason. And I think it's really Akins' spot to lose, and I don't think he will. But if Patrick gives Akins a run for his money in practice and in the wrestle-offs, I think Stutzman is going to have a really, really hard time deciding between the two, because you have two guys that had the potential to be All-Americans at the same spot. I don't know if you have anything further to say on.
Not on those two. I just wish that we could have like one wild card, and have 125 through heavyweight, and then have one wild card and decide that it's Patrick. I don't want two at every weight, because I think then our heavyweight problems are exacerbated. But
I will
could find a way for Patrick to get in there, because Lantry's great too. I asked you this last week, off air, and Lantry at 133 is great too. So it's not even like one of them can bulk up a bit.
Yeah, Lantry's a returning national qualifier too, so it's very hard, especially at the lower weights. And another weight where we have a national qualifier returning is 141 pounds. Mm-hmm. Colt Cotton has moved down to his more natural weight at 41 to make room for Tommy Forte at 49. But with his move down, he also has to compete with Jason Estevez, who very well may be the best pound-for-pound wrestler on the team. And that's saying a lot, considering some of the guys that are on the team. And Cotton is a returning national qualifier. At one point, he had the fastest pin at the national tournament before someone got one in like 18 seconds or some ridiculous number like that.
Yeah.
But he was 14-10 last season. If you look at, I think 8 or 9 of his 10 losses were to guys that were like in the top 15 in the nation. And he took Missouri's Le'Veon Mays like right down to the wire. And really, for the most part, Colt had him beat. And a lot of issues that we saw with Colt at 49 was Colt is very short and stocky. He's a short, stocky guy, really built for his size. And that's not really conducive at 49, where a lot of the guys were a lot taller than he was. So it was a lot harder for him to get in on shots and really work on his feet. And even on the mat, too, guys that would put in legs, it was a killer for him. But now at 41, he'll be with guys more around his height, more he can work with on his feet.
Yeah.
Estevez is coming off. He only wrestled 3 matches last season, but and outside of that, he was injured. It's gonna be another situation where you have 2 guys that could be potential All-Americans. They need to wrestle off, and whoever gets it, gets it. Obviously, with both injuries are a concern. Cotton came back not this past season, the season before his redshirt freshman season, and really he came back from a horrific knee injury and, took the UB world by storm, pinning the guy in his first match back against Columbia. It'll be very exciting to see their wrestle off because their styles of wrestling are completely different. Estevez is very slow. Slow isn't the right word. He is very tactical about the way he does things. But Colt, he is a ride or die. He does things balls to the wall, and at full bore 100% of the time. And he goes for things. He goes for risky things that are either a big payday or can put himself into trouble. So it'd be interesting to see the dynamic when those two eventually go at it in a wrestle-off. Anything to add there before I move on?
Nope. Other than that, I hope that you only have one weight class left.
I do have one weight class left, and then we're done.
Yeah, I think there's nothing I can say that I haven't learned from you, which means that you've said it already. So.
And the last is 174. As we talked I believe it was our first show, Tyler Rill is moving up to 74 to allow Muhammad McBride to go down to his more natural 165, which that's another weight where there's, I think, 4 other guys there, but I think McBride definitely has that locked down. But at 174, Rill has to compete with Ryan Cromer, who redshirted last season. Was 17-8 in opens. He did a really good job. Mm-hmm. Austin Weigel, he's coming to his redshirt junior year. He's 14-10 last year. He finished 4th at the New York State Championships in the A bracket and did very well. I believe. I don't know if it was because of some injuries at some other places. Sutsman entered both McBride and Weigel into the A bracket there. And then you have true freshman Logan Moriarty, who I thought was a steal, would be the steal of the class. He's a 4-time Missouri place winner. He won the state championship his senior year. And really, Stutzman and Boomer Fetchko kind of plucked him right out underneath of Missouri's nose, really.
Yep.
And there's another guy that I've heard rumors that hasn't been confirmed yet, a fifth-year senior transfer in from Hofstra, which Hofstra is another solid wrestling school in New York State. They've had success with guys going to the national tournament, and this guy, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's another fifth-year senior that'll have to compete with Tyler Rill, another fifth-year senior. So you have 2 fifth-year seniors, and you have 2 younger guys in Cromer, Weigel, and Moriarty that could potentially all vie for the starting position. Mm-hmm. So the wrestle-offs there will be very interesting to watch. And especially with Tyler Rill's injury history. 2 years ago, lost the season after a few matches. Last season was in and out of the lineup due to some injury issues. So if he doesn't stay healthy, then it's a good insurance to have all the depth that's there. But just picking a starter for opening day, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see Moriarty. I didn't pay him. I just want to see him.
Yeah.
But, I also just think I hope that they periscope wrestle-offs like they did last year, and we can just see some good stuff and know that they're getting good competition in the weight room, and that the guy who's coming out is the guy who's, come out on top of that competition.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's all I had for wrestling, so I think we're just about done.
This was show number 4. So we have certainly one more, probably 2 more. It depends a bit on our schedules and what we can fit in before things get going. But we do have, from the time this airs, we will have 10 days to try and fit 2 in. It's just a question of how quickly I get an internet in my new apartment. But we've definitely covered a good range so far of every team and every sport, and that Google spread say. So we'll not sure right now when we'll have another show of this, but we are at this point just over a week from women's soccer starting. Our first Olympic Rundown show will be on Sunday, August 21st, on the heels of that opening weekend. That'll probably be a shorter one because we'll only have that, and we'll preview men's and women's soccer, or men's soccer and volleyball, I guess, are the things that we'll talk about in preview form there. And otherwise, feel free to go back and look at Sunday's show, at last Friday's or last Wednesday's show, catch up on the other things we've said as we try to catch up and preview everything here. And, we're just getting there. It's almost time for real, honest-to-goodness UB sports that we can get back in action and writing again. So for John McWhinney, I'm Matt Gritzmacher. We're from ubbullrun.com. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you soon.